Hey everybody. It's almost happy 4th of July almost. June June 29th, 2026. Leslie here, Leslie Plazic, Zazoo Plazz here for my weekly Sunday. It's Sunday morning. It's like 3:30 in the morning on Monday morning. But I'm doing it for yesterday. That's how we roll around here. Neighbors probably sleeping. I'm sure sleeping, but nah. Hopefully, with this mic, you can hear me. I tend to be a little soft spoken anyway, but in the middle of the night, there's something about this hour. I feel like I have company. But it also is when I get my best insights. And it's Cancer season, so I'm going to focus on that a little bit. It's full moon today. So Capricorn full moon. As I'm doing this, sun's in Cancer, 7 degrees of Cancer. The moon is at 29 degrees of Sag, pretty close to my Venus. My Venus is at like 26, 27. And the moon just passed over the galactic center, which is pretty cool. And it's at that Cancer Capricorn axis. That's pretty cool. It's pretty powerful. This is pretty powerful energies right now. The sun's opposite the moon, so that's interesting. Sun square Saturn too, and square Neptune. So yeah, there's a lot of creative tension there. There's and Lilith is conjunct the moon, so that's sort of like the hidden, dark, like the feminine, the dark feminine power energy kind of thing. So yeah, so that's what's going on. Venus is in Leo, Mars is in Gemini. We've got a lot of Cancer energy. Jupiter's at the very end of Cancer, about to go into Leo. So yeah, Mercury's conjunct Jupiter. So that's interesting right there. We've got a big pile up there. We're going to be going into Leo pretty soon, but we still have 3 weeks in July to get through Cancer season. So, but I look at, Cancer, So we're going to be looking, I think, mostly just the Cancer energy today. There's a lot going on. So we got a big celebration coming up. I was 10 in 1976 at the when we had the bicentennial, and now 50 years later I'm 60. So, two big American, milestones within my lifetime. And so I'm not going to get into the specifics. I don't watch the news. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of things that are going on, but I prefer to go higher. So my Facebook stuff, I have come to sort of find the secret spice where I can dance around things and imply things and get the humor out of it and get people to sort of see the humorous side of things. Mel Brooks just turned 100 years old yesterday. So we got to give a shout out to Mel Brooks. If there's no better example of what humor does to you, folks. If you want to live to 100 plus, you got to start focusing on the funny, like here every week in the Zazoo Plazz report. You're not going to find this stuff anywhere else. There's only one of me. And I get the good downloads. I get the good stuff because I'm up in the middle of the night. I get stuff other people don't get, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I find, maybe kind of the oddball creative types and the sort of woo-woo spiritual types will kind of get, you know, I, there are very few people I've met in my life that are interested in all the same things that I am. I might get some people for the astrology and some people for my jokes. I know they're pretty cheesy, but, some of them are pretty good. Some people like the nostalgia, people my age. The younger people tend, they like maybe my Gen Z stories about my kids, or they just, they get the Sagittarius energy. Some people just like my energy, and I'm a little weird, but um, there's very few people I think who will get the whole package, and I get it. I don't even. I'm still learning about myself. I don't even get everything that I'm about. I've got gifts I probably don't even know about. Somebody up there is going, when is she going to figure it out? My spirit guides are up there going, oh. They wake me up in the middle of the night. They're like, hey, dumbass. You know that dream you just had? Yeah, write it down. So anyway, so there's that. Yeah, and people used to like my cooking, and that's because I got midheaven and Cancer, so I'm good at taking care of people. I'm the person. I'm the mom who used to go and teach CCD every week, or have kids over my house, and I'd have snacks, and I was that mom. One year I helped the kids. I think it was our youngest son. I think he was in like third or fourth grade, maybe fourth grade. I helped the kids to put together little duffel bags for foster kids who didn't, I found out they had to do a service project every year, and the elementary school kids. So usually the kids would do something like collect food for the food bank, or for St. Vincent de Paul, or clothes, or things like that. But this one year, there was a woman in our church who worked for St. Vincent de Paul, but she drove a yellow sports car. It's pretty cool. I found out that she would put together like little duffel bags for foster kids in the Hartford area, because there's some poor areas of Hartford. These kids who would get taken out of their homes by, child and family services in the middle of the night because their parents were, unable to care for them, or there was, a domestic, dispute going on, or whatever, many reasons. But the kids could, they could only take so much because it was, sudden. So they wouldn't have like toiletries, they wouldn't have like a toy, or, clothes, things like that. And, little things like coloring books and things to keep them busy, maybe candy, or not candy, but, snacks and little things till they could get settled in a new home, right? So I thought that would be a great project. So I came up with a list, for the kids of things, sort of a letter for the parents, kids take home to their parents, and, explaining the project and listing all these items, and then I had like a master sign-up list so the kids could come in and say, okay, I'm bringing this, or, I don't think we did it that way. I think each kid got a list of things that they could bring, and, we set like a price. We said, well, whatever, spend this much as a minimum, and then you can give whatever you want, and some kids would come in with really nice stuff, they really got into it, and they came in with a nice bags. They weren't all duffel bags, they were different kind of bags, but some of the kids brought toys and all kinds of coloring books, and little stuffed toys. A lot of them brought like little stuffed animals, and books. Some kids brought like books for the kids, and it was amazing. And then the lady came in, and she was amazed at what the kids had done, you know. And then we all carried the bags out. She had her yellow sports car there, and she put all the bags in her trunk, and then she goes away. She was like a boomer age, older boomer, you know, maybe early 40s, mid 40s. She was born, so you know, maybe she was in her 60s or something. But she was so grateful, and the kids had such a great time, you know, doing that. And that's a Cancer kind of thing, because and the readings today touch on this. um, I just, and the kids, these are the things that they remembered when they said, Mom, years later, my boys, our boys would say, Mom, yeah, I remember, when you did this, and the lady came, and, she took all the bags. The kids used to get a kick out of like going to the dollar store or Walmart or, wherever, Target, some inexpensive place, and picking out things. They really got into it. My boys, I think they had at least as much fun picking out presents for other kids their age, like when they had the giving tree at Christmas time. They used to love that. And then we'd get them, they'd say, they, they'd take note of things that they liked. And maybe they'd get a little, minifig or some little, toy. But, we'd say, no, you can't get, it's so-and-so's birthday. You're not going to get a big Lego set. You're going to get, we'd set a price limit. Like, okay, you can spend, $2 or $5 or whatever, take some money out of your piggy bank. We'd get them something. I'd find a little something to get them. Even if it was just a little thing, a little Matchbox car or something. And because they're only kids once. Maybe I'm a softie, but we had fun. Um, so, yeah, so Cancer has to do with, look at the crab, right? It carries its house on its back, or like the snail, right? These shellfish. Cancer is all about the mother, the moon, things to do with women, security, mothers, children, the home, finances. Kind of like, when my mom was the one who paid the bills and kept the books. My dad wasn't, he'd go out and make the money, and he'd spend the money. She'd spend the money too. She'd go out and get stuff, and she'd hide it under the bed. My parents were, Pluto at the very end of Cancer generation, right? So, like, right where the moon, right where this, Mercury and Jupiter are right now is where my dad's Cancer is. My mom's Cancer was right at the end there. So, yeah, she was good about, managing the money, she knew exactly, where the money was going, where the money could come from, and, they had it down to a system. She did that. If he so much as moved a file or a piece of paper out of place, damn it, she would know. She'd be, Ray, what'd you do with that thing? I had it right there. She didn't go on the computer, like today, like we had, my ex and he was the one. I was the finance one. I get the big ideas, but he was the one he was kind of more detail. He was into the, I had spreadsheets too, but he was, and it's funny, I paid certain bills. I would pay like the mortgage and the utilities and all, and the grocery, deal with that stuff. And then he would handle, like the insurance, because he had it through his work. He was the main, insurance, provider, because his, he earned the most, and he had the best insurance, so he did that, and he would do things like pay the, I would sometimes pay the tax, the insurance, for like the car and the property insurance, stuff like that. But he did, I guess I handled most of the monthly bills like my mom. but he handled the big purchases and the, certain things, his, stuff through his work he would do. So we split it up. And, when you're married, you do that. Well, my parents would have been married 67 years this past week, June 27th. So I always think of that, and then our anniversary, we got married on July 1st. So that's going to be, what is it, 29th? Wednesday would have been our, what was it? Let's see, what is this? Would have been our, 31? Would have been our 31st. Is that right? 31st anniversary if we had stayed together. We only made it 28 and a half years, but yeah. So anyway, but you still think, even when you're, not with your former spouse, you still think of that day. You think because you have karma with people. You have people who are in your life, they're in your energy. They have part of your energy. You give your energy to your kids, things that, you've worked on, jobs you've had. You've left energy there, and you need to process it. You need to integrate it, right? It's before you can move on. So, anyway, okay, Zazoo, yapped enough about nothing and everything. Okay. All right. So, I like to think about these things. And not just at this time of year. I mean, I think about people and things all the time. I'm a Scorpio. You really, Scorpios don't let things go very easily. We're fixed water, man. We got a lot under the surface, but on the top we look very calm, like a tranquil pond. Cancer's more like the ocean waves, But Scorpios are more like that pond. But then you don't see all the stuff underneath going on, under the lake. I always we'd go up to lakes in New Hampshire, with the boys on vacation. We used to go to Lake Placid in New York, and or Lake George, and then we used to go up to New Hampshire and Maine and stay at, lakes. And, you'd have these docks floating in the middle of the lake, or you'd go off the rope swing, and I'd be like, oh man, I wonder what's under here, because it was dark and you couldn't see, And then you'd feel like a piece of grass or something brush up against your leg, or in the ocean, you feel a piece of seaweed. I have, Jaws nightmares. I have Jaws PTSD. Dun, 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 dun. Most kids in my generation have that. It's just, these are the things we didn't get all worked up about, like things other generations got worked up about, We didn't wake up at night worrying about world peace or, well, maybe nuclear destruction, but I think people say, oh, Gen X, you didn't protest anything, but they had no idea the angst and the agony that was going on inside of our heads, thinking about these little stupid things, but it was big. It was big to us. I can speak for myself anyway. I can't necessarily speak for anyone else in my generation. And I get a little annoyed when some people try to, rope me in, like, oh, us Gen Xers did this. We Gen Xers. Anyway, some people, they need that community, right? They need people, backing them up, right? I don't need that. I'll tell you what I experienced, and maybe you did or maybe you didn't, but I don't care. I mean, I care, but I don't really. Keep it to yourself. I'm kidding. It's a joke. But no, baby, I hope that, we don't express things emotionally as much as the younger generations. We kind of keep it all inside. But if a little bell goes off and some of this warms your heart, or, right, I would love to know. I really would. I would love to know if I've helped you in some way with my little ramblings. You know, if I did, I did. If I didn't, I didn't. I'm not trying to influence anybody. I'm just telling my little stories, and it helps me. So, anyway, um, yeah, it would be these little things that would become big things in my head. You know, like what was that thing that brushed up against me? Is there quicksand in this lake? Am I gonna go down in the swamp? Is the swamp monster gonna get me? you know, is it is it? Am I gonna swallow a watermelon seed and have a watermelon grow in my stomach? These are the things that used to get to me. Or I'd read something in a newspaper, or in a magazine, or hear somebody say something, and I'd think about it, and then it would get bigger and bigger in my head. You know, that's the stuff that used to really bother me. Anyway, I could get a little obsessive, just a little. Anyway, okay. Second Kings. See, here comes the readings. So Elijah, the prophet, right? It said he used to go to this town, Shunem, and there was a rich woman there who used to have him over for dinner, and so he used to come, when he was in town, this woman would, make him have him over for dinner, and she said she made up a little room, a room in a room. That's a Pink Panther, Peter Sellers, right? A room. She arranged, a little on her roof, a little room with a bed, desk, chair, and little table, and where he could stay, when he came into town, which was really nice. So, Elijah said to his servant, this guy, Gehazi, he said, is there some way we could help her? Find out some way we can help. And so he said, well, she's been wanting a son. She doesn't have any kids yet. So he says to call her, tell her next year she's going to be holding a baby son. So, that's, it's very interesting. So this Gehazi guy, it said he was witness to many miracles, but he got greedy, right? So he brought leprosy on himself because he stole things and he got greedy, right, for money. So isn't this, true in our times, right? We have, people, politicians, people like that, calling out people, for this and that. You have so much money, but then it's a projection because some of the people calling out the people for being corrupt, for having all kinds of money, also are, in positions of power and positions of wealth. So there's this double standard, there's this hypocrisy, right? If you're going to call somebody out, there's the pot calling the kettle black or whatever, those who live in glass houses, right, shouldn't throw stones. So, who among us has not had a moment of, weakness, or, of wanting something, or getting caught up in the material world? I mean, we are spirits in the material world, right? That's a song. Yeah, but that's what we are. It's incredibly dense on the planet where we are. So, it is very easy to get, obsessed, caught up in the material world to the exclusion of the spiritual. But what we have to do is the balance, right? The dark and the light, not go all over, So in our, in the all woo woo unicorns, and forget about, doing, that we're on the earth for a reason, to learn things, right? And to teach others to, how, to develop our faith, and to show people, um, you know, how God has blessed us in our life. And all of us can do that differently because we have different experiences that we can share, right? But the key is to always, strive to become better instead of wallowing, right? And staying stuck where you are. Um, okay, so, a lot of these Bible stories are meant to show us, give us examples, and they're timeless, right? So, and then the Psalm says, forever I will sing the goodness of the Lord. So it's not just God blesses you and that's it. When you're on this path, you're, it's forever. In other words, you don't, you don't, there's no going back. You've got to go forward, right? Once you're committed to that, and then but it's a constant praising God, right? Thanking God for source, the universe, for all of your blessings. And the more you do that, the more you will get that in return, right? So it says we're exalted, um, and it's how God shows justice and fairness. Basically, it's karma. It's what you put out, you're going to get back. For to the Lord belongs our shield, the Holy One of Israel, our King. So the shield, then again, there's protection. That's Cancer, right? The shell. So, so God is both, He's our shield, our protection, and our, at the same time, we're exalted, right? So there's this royalty, this, being lifted up, right? Instead of going down, we can go down in the crab bucket, right? Or we can be brought up. And we need a little help. Sometimes we need a little bit of help to get to the top of the bucket. Because sometimes, we get pulled down. We doubt ourselves, right? We think, oh, I really want to go and do this thing, but I'm not sure if I can do it, The most gifted people go through that, right? You say, oh, look at that person. Some people just do it on a more public stage, like people who, build rockets and cars and things. People who accomplish great things have also failed, like had major epic fails. And people will make fun of them. Oh, look at so-and-so. He's such, he's a loser. Yeah, but when have you ever tried something spectacular and failed? I mean, there's only the trying and the failing, really, in life. And then every now and then you make it, something works for a little while, and then it doesn't. But, there's just the trying, the doing, the not try. Isn't it? That's a Yoda thing. There is no try. There is do. There was do and not do. So anyway, So then in Romans chapter 6, it talks about being baptized into Jesus, right? Oh, good. I had the pen on my cover on my pen. It's very good for scratching your back. This pen. Okay. So baptized also into Jesus's death. So we die to that, ego part of ourselves, right? We have to die to that part before we can start living, we can really embracing, Christ, the blessings that Christ brings onto us when we're on this path, right? But you can't bring all that crap with you, right? You have to die to it. So there goes my fridge. So I'll go in. I've enough preaching, but see, first letter to Peter. He says, "You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, announcing the praises of Him who calls you out of darkness into holy light." So there's this dark and light, thing. out of the darkness into the light. There's the full moon, right? We go from, we go from the new moon, uh, where it's dark, and then it's half and half, and then it's full, right? All the phases of the moon in between. So we go, that's the moon. It rules Cancer. So, that's interesting. So we have Matthew chapter 10 this week. So it talks about being worthy of Jesus. So, in other words, he says, here's what you have to do. It says, if you're, not that you don't love your parents, but if you love your family more than Jesus, if you're not, in other words, I think what that means, you have to take up your cross and follow him. It means that you can't let other people dictate. You have to follow your path. So if your parents tell you that you have to be something, and you know in your heart that you're here to do something else, right? You have to be true to that, right? Even if it means, some people will not get it. Some people you might lose some people from your life. People who think that you ought to be, doing what they think you ought to be doing, right? Not that you don't help your family members and your children, but if, it's an earthly thing versus, a heavenly thing. In other words, we have to look higher, we can get too attached to who we think we are in this life, this title, your mom, your dad, you are this, you are the son, you are my daughter. Yeah, but we are children of God before, and we're always going to be, right? You're in this life, you might be this person's son, daughter, wife, husband, whatever, right? But you can't identify with that more than what your soul has done over, your whole lifetime, your whole multiple lifetimes. This is what I think. Take it with a grain of salt. But this is how what I come to. It's the whole thing of losing your life to find it, right? Whoever finds his life, in other words, if you were, you're just all the time after the perfect, you want the perfect life, the perfect, family, the perfect Instagrammable, whatever house. You want a shiny, everything has to be perfect and shiny. That's not real, right? Then what you have to do to get that, to get 1 million followers, to get whatever, you're losing, you're not being authentic, right? To your soul, to what your soul wants to express. A lot of times you have to shove that down to get approval by the external world, including your family. I know, I dealt with this for a long time. I knew that I had to do certain things, or be a certain way, and please certain people, in my family, in my world, to get by, to get along, right? Because you knew, if you didn't do a certain thing in school, you get, the nuns were gonna, you get detention, or you get, you had to send a thank you note to Aunt so and so when she sent you a present, or else you were going to be in the doghouse. Your name would be Mud, as my mother used to say. Your name's going to be Mud if you don't send on the thank you note. Like I said, I used to have nightmares about these things, not big, huge things. Just that Aunt so-and-so was going to hate me, and my life would just be hell, or I was going to hell, or I was going to have to go to confession because I told a little white lie about something. these things would consume me, and that was my childhood, well into adulthood. Anyway, um, so he says, but on the positive side, if you receive someone, a prophet or a righteous person in your home, show hospitality, give a drink of water to a thirsty, one of those little ones, you know, you'll be rewarded in kind. So, you know, if someone's thirsty and you give them a bottle of water or something, next time you're thirsty, somebody's going to give you some water, or you know what I mean. You'll be you won't eat You'll be provided for, right? Cancer is all about hospitality. I had an aunt who was a Cancer, and she was a very good hostess, not like Libra. Libra is good at, like, I'm a Libra, and Libras are good at sort of, you know, getting people at the party to kind of mingle and get along in harmony. Cancer is more like, um, to do with the food and the hominess, right? And feeling safe and wanting to be a homebody and, na. So that's Cancer. So, yeah. So the song for today. So it turns out, June 10th, no, June 28th, 1975. So I was 9. Um, let's see, one, oh, that Eagles album. What, take it to the limit. What's the name of it? Anyways, their 4th album, was it went to number 1. And on that, so on that album was Take It to the Limit. Okay. And which was Randy Meisner, he played bass for the Eagles. He's the one, he started writing the song, and then Glenn Frey and Don Henley helped him finish it, right? But he was the lead singer. This was the only song that he sang the A side, lead on the A side song. A side meaning that there used to be a record. There would be A side and B side. Kids, A side was like the single that was released, the main song, and then B side was like one that you hardly ever heard. You wouldn't hear it on the radio. It would just be on the other side of the record. You'd get a 45. You'd play one side, then you flip it over. 45 was about that big. Then you play the B side, but you have to, get up and physically flip the record. It was kind of fun. You had to be on your toes, because when the record was over, sometimes if you had a stereo, it would automatically, the little needle would come up and go down. But if you had a cheap little record, you had to physically lift it up. Like, if it went all the way in, it would kind of like scratch. And then, so you kind of, sometimes you had to move the record, the little needle, right to the beginning of the record when you wanted to play it, and then lift it up, flip it over. Oh, it was work intense. It was labor intensive. You kids are so spoiled today. Unbelievable. Yeah. And then if you had it on cassette, you'd have an A side. You have a side 1 and a side 2, and you had to flip it over. Geez, I forgot about that. Yeah, you had like one side, and that would finish. It would go zzz to the end, and then you would open the thing, take the tape out, turn it around, put it. Oh man, those were fun times. We didn't mind it though, because that was how it was. I don't know. Anyway, it was kind of nice. It was intentional. You had to pay attention to the music and not doing a million things at the same time, It was nice. So anyway, so about this song, Take It to the Limit. It's about, Oh yeah, I didn't finish. So at the end, click the link. Watch this one. Is Randy Eisner at the end of the song? He hits this high note, and it is really high. And so he was worried that he wouldn't be able to hit that high note, and he was so stressed out. He got ulcers because of it, and he had he was fighting with Glenn Fry and the other members about it because he didn't want to do it, and they made him do it, and he did it, and the audience loved it and applauded. But he ended up leaving the band because he had fights. There were relationships that got strained because of all this. He was a Pisces, so he was probably a pretty emotional guy. And Pisces doesn't always finish things. They get good insights, but they need a little push. So so this was one of their most played songs. They said that this was the album that kind of moved them beyond country rock to California sound that they had. One of their top 20 most performed songs. They performed it 870 times per Wikipedia. So it's a good one, and it's a song about yearning for one more go around. It's like me, my parents lost me at the Big E State Fair when I was like 4 years old, almost like 4, something like that, because I wanted one more go around the merry-go-round. I had a ticket, and I wanted to go grab the golden ring or the brass ring or whatever. So I slipped away from my parents when they were going to see the sheep. I didn't want to see the sheep. So they lost me at this fair with all these people, and they said my name on the announce. Finally, they backtracked and they found me at the merry-go-round, going around, having a great time on the horse. So that's like, I wanted to see if I could go one more time. I wanted to take it to the limit, right? And I went for it. And my parents were a nervous wreck, but I had to do that. See, and not that I wanted to hurt my parents, but my own little purpose that I had in mind. Kids will do that. Kids will just, heck with you. I'm gonna go and do what I want to do, right? So we have to be that way. We have to be innocent like kids and just do it, right? Not think so much about what is this one going to think? How am I versus that person? Kids don't think that way. They go, I want this. I'm going to go for it, right? So that's how God, I think, wants us to be. Not that, and I was protected. Nobody kidnapped me. Nobody took me. I was safe. I climbed up on, I don't know how I got up on the horse. Or they see one kid come, a 4-year-old coming by themselves. They're like, geez, they'd have the cops, they'd have the police and everybody. Back in 1969, I guess it wasn't. I gave my ticket to the guy, and he must have helped me up on the horse, and that was that. Anyway. So yeah, it seems, when you feel like you got nothing to lose, just go for it, right? What would you do? What chance would you take if you weren't afraid, right? Otherwise, people stay in mediocrity, right? They stay in things that they're miserable, right? They really are, but they're not honest with themselves about it, right? So, if you give as much love and, use your gifts, God will lift you up, right? God will reward you with, to lift you to a higher level. But you have to make the effort, right? So anyway, that's all I got to say for today. Happy 4th, all my American friends, everybody. And however you spend the holiday, you know, hope you have a big, hope it, a big bang. Goes off with a big bang. Have a, you know, treat yourself. Have a hot dog. Enjoy the day, however you do. And take care. And I will see you next week. I'll be back here, same place, different time. See ya. Bye-bye.